No, yeah, that one. Werner, being an INTJ, he never really thought that the photography was his little thing. He took pictures of the family, but he never thought it was worth anything. I'm an ENFP, so I'm the promoter. I'm the one who talks to everybody about things. So I finally used to grab things out of the trash after he had printed them and threw them away, and submitted a couple to an exhibit that was called Undiscovered Artist. And guess what happened to the first one? He won the very first one. That was the picture that won Undiscovered Artist. I brought it in a larger format, I think, but I think it shows better. It is one of the sources of the River Jordan in Israel. And at that point, he was still titling pictures, and he called it Paradise Found. There was some emotion that came out there. The place just grabs you and pulls you in. He did it with a lens called the fish eye. He was fascinated with what the fish eye lens could do with photography, and it would distort certain things and create moods. So he tried to create moods with the fish eye, and I'll show you a number of fish eye come. So that was the first one. From the first one to the national exposure was exactly 7 years. Can you imagine if he would have lived longer? All of a sudden, something happened to him. 2 years later, he went with a friend of mine, photographer in Israel, to an international conference. He got himself invited to that, and there were famous photographers from all over the world, Japan, England, and so on. And he brought a portfolio, and he was there 2 weeks at that conference, and he came back with a completely different outlook on things. That was his second trip to Israel. If you turn to page 25 in the book, that happened during our only trip together. He went after that by himself. Page 25 is in the southern desert of Israel, and those are basically crystals, and the place is called the Carpentry Shop. My uncle and aunt, with whom we traveled extensively when we were visiting there, were naturalists, both of them. And as we were traveling through the desert, my uncle said, "Would you like to see something interesting?" And we said, "Sure, anytime." So we went on a little side road, you know, all rocky and everything, and there it was. And Werner said, "Oh my God, what the earth can sculpture." And that was the first person that triggered the idea of earth sculpture. And from that point on, he started looking for formations that were earth sculptures. And this book is really basically the award winners, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, Wayne, we're ready for the next one. You may recognize some of the places, but they may not look the way you remember them. I was there, but I never took another picture after our first trip because I couldn't photograph the way he did. That was in Death Valley. I don't know. You know, I went back years later to find different places, and I did find them. There are a couple of other ones in Death Valley which are very, very interesting. One literally looks like a painting. It's a set of two that look like paintings. Basically, my living room and dining room are the award winners. Okay, let's go to the next one. You'll also see he loves contrast. He uses a lot of contrast. That was a fascinating thing. We walked at 4 o'clock in the morning, almost, I don't know, 3 miles or so from the road on something that felt like walking on boulders to this lake. It was a volcanic lake. And you're going to see another picture of it where there is a human figure that gives you the proportion between the walls and the lake and the person, the size. That is how the wall looks. The wall of the lake, and it's like 600-800 feet high, looks literally like crystals running down the wall. And the crystals are hexagonals, and it's called the pool of the hexagons. And that's the color, beautiful, yes. It's kind of bluish. A little bit like Crater Lake, the blue of the sky is reflected on the water, and the water reflects the blue on the rocks. I don't have to tell you what that is. El Capitan. Ansel Adams made it famous. We were there, as you see. This is more of a winter scene. It was one of the spring we went to Ansel Borrego in March. And you really can see the snow, and not a lot of tourists there at that time. There were two pictures that we spent days till he got the right picture. That was one of them. He wanted a cloud. Ansel Adams wanted the rock. Werner wanted a cloud on it. But that's El Capitan, which is one of the few features that I understand our astronauts can see from the moon. That is in Yellowstone. It's one of the pools in Yellowstone, not the famous one, Old Faithful, but rather one that seemed to bubble up at unusual times and unpredictable times. And it just so happened that we heard something around the corner as we were there, and he ran, and he caught the water coming up. So that was kind of interesting. And he would do things like that. Climb on high rocks in the middle of the ocean, on the coast of Oregon, and all kind of things. I climbed on the next rock and took a picture of him taking pictures on the rock. Anybody recognize that? Bryce Canyon. Bryce Canyon is full of these things. And that's from one of the lookouts, I'm sorry, lookouts. But you can go down. Now, down is no problem. But going up was 40, 50 pounds of photography, which is what we carried in those days, because he carried 3 Nikons, 35 millimeters, with a couple of lenses for those, like the fisheye and telephotos and so on. Then he had a Hasselblad. And by the way, this was taken with a Hasselblad, and I think, John, you probably know what that is. Hello, John.
Yes.
Heard of a Hasselblad?
I have not.
You haven't heard of a Hasselblad? Wow. It's a medium format camera made in Sweden, and it was kind of a photographer's dream. Let me put it this way. In 1990, a lens cost $2,000, a lens. We did have 2 of them. The camera itself, I don't even remember. I think it cost the price of a house. But it makes the most beautiful pictures, the Hasselblad. Most of the medium formats are Hasselblads.